6 months pregnant, my husband pushed me down the stairs. Married for 5 years, Ethan has always loved me as he did in the beginning. Until his first love returned to the country, he pushed me, 6 months pregnant, down the stairs. Looking at the blood all over the floor, he turned a blind eye. "Vivian, don't pretend. Don't think I'll be fooled by a little blood. Vivian, you will never be better than Claire." It was only then that I realized Ethan had always had an unforgettable first love. If that's the case, then this marriage is better off ended. But when I threw the divorce papers in front of Ethan, his eyes welled up with tears. "Vivian, please give me one more chance, okay? Ethan, I beg you, please take me to the hospital first. I'm really in so much pain." I lay on the ground, one hand clutching my stomach, the other desperately grabbing Ethan's pant leg. But Ethan, standing before me, looked at me with a blank expression. "Vivian, don't pretend in front of me. I didn't use any force just now. Don't think I don't know you only fell from the stairs on purpose, because you didn't want me to pick up Claire." Looking up at Ethan's condescending gaze, I could only plead again and again. "Ethan, I beg you, I really didn't lie this time. This is your child too. Vivian, don't use the child to threaten me. Do you think I'll fall for some kind of hype?" But my pleas didn't soften him in the slightest. Instead, he furrowed his brows, said nothing more, kicked my hand away, stepped over my body, and left without looking back. Watching Ethan's resolute back, I closed my eyes in despair. He had clearly promised to go with me for the prenatal checkup, but just as we were about to leave, Ethan suddenly received a call from Ryan saying Claire was returning to the country today. Seeing the complicated expression on Ethan's face as he hung up, my heart inexplicably tightened in my throat. I stepped forward to grab him, wanting to ask what was wrong, but he suddenly brushed my hand away and said he had an urgent matter, then hurriedly left the house. When I chased after him, I found the elevator had lost power and Ethan was about to turn and take the stairs. I stepped in front of him first. "Ethan, you said you'd go with me to the prenatal checkup today. Vivian, don't make a fuss. Claire is divorced. She's returning to the country today, and I have to pick her up." "Who is Claire? Is she more important than me?" "I am your wife. She is the love of my life." Saying this, Ethan impatiently waved away my hand as I held his, and because I lost my balance, I fell straight down the stairs. But Ethan, who saw me fall down the stairs with his own eyes, turned a blind eye to the blood on the floor. He went to pick up Claire, leaving me who had fallen behind. Watching his increasingly blurred figure, I finally couldn't hold on any longer and fainted. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. Looking at the familiar yet strange white surroundings and touching my flat abdomen, I knew I had ultimately failed to keep this child. "Sai, how could you be so careless? If the neighbor hadn't seen you when coming upstairs, it wouldn't have been just the child at risk, but your life too." When I woke up, the director came into the ward, his eyes full of reproach and concern. Looking at the director who had always been kind to me, I couldn't help but tear up. It's okay. Don't overthink it. You're still young. You'll have children. By the way, where's Ethan? Didn't he say he would accompany you to the prenatal checkup today? How come you collapsed alone in the stairwell? And he's not here. While saying this, the director was examining me, and only after confirming I was fine did she finally breathe a sigh of relief. But listening to the director's words, recalling Ethan's resolute figure as he left, and the look in his eyes when he said my lifelong love, I held back tears that welled up in my eyes. "Director, I want to come back, is that okay?" I answered evasively, but the director seemed to guess something and sighed heavily. "Come back. First, take care of your health. I'll talk to the hospital leadership." "Thank you." Watching the director's departing figure, my heart was filled with mixed emotions. I was originally an obstetrician and gynecologist, with little time for romance, and Ethan and I only met at a matchmaking banquet. At first, I didn't feel anything for him, but later I fell deeply under his intense pursuit. He would occasionally buy me flowers, give me rides to and from work, and chat with me on the phone over and over again. Naturally, we got married and had our own child. After becoming pregnant, in order to focus on taking care of him during his career peak and our baby, I submitted my resignation to the hospital. But what I didn't expect was that all his love for me vanished the moment his first love returned to the country. Since that's the case, I no longer care about this fake marriage. Watching the sky gradually darken, a strong wave of drowsiness swept over me. I don't know how long I had been asleep when suddenly the ringing phone beside me woke me up. Sister-in-law, Ethan has had quite a bit to drink. Can you come pick him up? The call was from Ethan's friend Ryan, the same person who told him that Claire was coming back. The line was noisy, but in my days, I still clearly heard Ethan's drunken words on the other end. Why are you calling her? What use is a pregnant woman coming here? You all don't know, ever since she got pregnant, she's become uglier and uglier. Her nose has gotten bigger, she's gained weight, and that belly TSK covered in stretch marks, like countless maggots. Just looking at her makes me feel sick. Claire is still the best, still so beautiful. Even after marriage, she looks just like she did back then. After saying this, there was a burst of laughter. Even Ryan struggled to hold back his urge to laugh. But listening to his drunken words, my heart was bitter. So, the reason he stopped sleeping with me since I started getting stretch marks at 5 months was this. I had always thought he was just afraid of pressing on the baby. It turned out, it was all just my wishful thinking. After a noisy moment, Ryan's strongly restrained voice came through again. Sister-in-law, Ethan is drunk. Don't listen to his nonsense. It's fine, whether he's drunk or not. I make him feel disgusted, so don't call again. Without waiting for Ryan to finish, I spoke calmly, then hung up and turned off my phone. I threw the phone aside and looked out at the pitch-black window. I thought my heart would ache so much that I couldn't breathe, but unexpectedly, my heart was so calm that there wasn't a single ripple. It turns out that letting go of him was just that simple. After that, I never touched my phone again until a week later when I was discharged from the hospital. On the day I left, I turned on my phone, but aside from a few missed calls from my mom, no one else had reached out to me. I settled the bill and called my mom to tell her I was getting a divorce. At first, my mom was very surprised, but after hearing the whole story, she angrily cursed on the other end of the phone and then said she would fly over to seek justice for me. I stopped her. When you are completely hopeless about someone, there's no need to make a fuss anymore. But I didn't expect that on my way from the hospital to find a lawyer, I would run into Ethan and Claire. Ethan, isn't that Vivian? I've seen her on your phone. Hearing my name mentioned, I turned around and met Ethan's gentle eyes. But that gentleness vanished the moment he saw me, replaced instantly by a cold, piercing gaze. You're a pregnant woman. Why aren't you staying home properly? What are you wandering around for? Don't fall and then drag someone into a scam. Saying this, Ethan walked over. His tall body blocked out all my sunlight, hiding me in complete shadow. I looked down at my loose clothes, my belly no longer carrying a child, and suddenly found it laughable. Even now, he still thought my fall that day was an act. I lifted my eyes to meet his cold stare, about to say something, but was interrupted by Claire approaching. Oh, Ethan, don't say that. Pregnant women need to get some fresh air too. It's so suffocating to stay cooped up at home. Hello, I'm Claire, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. Claire extended her hand warmly, but her words carried the full posture of a victor. It was my first time meeting Claire. She was indeed very beautiful, with delicate features and a curvaceous figure. And then there was me, growing increasingly bloated from pregnancy. The contrast suddenly made me feel insecure. Looking at Claire's snow-white hand, I hid my rough hands behind my back, reluctant to reach out. Vivian, why are you standing there dumbfounded? Seeing Claire's hand awkwardly hanging in midair, Ethan frowned and stepped in to help her out. It's nothing at all. Maybe it's because we're not that familiar yet. Vivian, Ethan, and I are about to go eat. Why don't you join us? Saying this, Claire didn't lower her hand that was still suspended in the air. Instead, she turned around and casually linked her arm with mine. Actually, I didn't want to go at first, but in the end, Claire half pushed, half pulled me into a self-service seafood hot pot restaurant. But it was just right. Some things, matters involving the three of us, can only be clearly discussed together. Vivian, you have to try the oysters at this place. They're so delicious. Back in college, Ethan and I loved coming here to eat, and I would always eat a lot of oysters. Claire said, blushing while continuously picking oysters into my bowl. I glanced at Ethan, whose face was as cold as ice, then looked at the seafood spread out in front of me and couldn't help but furrow my brows. I am allergic to seafood. Ethan knows this, yet he still chose Claire's favorite seafood buffet. Vivian, aren't you going to eat? Claire suddenly looked very aggrieved, her eyes reddening as she stared at the growing pile of seafood in front of me. Claire, you eat your own. Don't mind her. She's always like this. Who knows who she's trying to act delicate for? Saying this, Ethan didn't even glance at me, instead continuously piling oysters onto Claire's plate. And in his eyes, there was nothing but indulgence for Claire. Looking at everything before me, I couldn't help but clench my fists. Once, Ethan knew about my allergy and seafood would never even appear before me, but now he called me pretentious. At the beginning, he was the one who first provoked me, the one who said he would love only me for a lifetime, and now he is also the one who hurts me the deepest. So this was all that he called love. Ethan, let's get a divorce. Looking at the two of them being so affectionate in front of me, I finally voiced my decision. If there is no love, then let go. I thought Ethan would agree to my words quickly, but unexpectedly, upon hearing me, Ethan suddenly stopped his hand that was holding the oyster. The powerless oyster fell heavily onto the table, making a dull thud. Instead, it was Claire, who was eating oysters beside us, who looked up with eyes full of delight upon hearing what I said. Vivian, did you hit your head when you fell last time and go crazy? Ethan suddenly slammed his chopsticks down on the table, lifting his gaze to look at me with eyes filled not only with shock, but also an emotion I couldn't understand. Divorce? Vivian, do you even know what you're saying? If you leave me, what do you have left? You're just a pregnant woman. Besides me, who else would want you? Seeing Ethan's mockery and certainty, I finally understood the reason for his reckless behavior. I stood up and looked at him resolutely. Ethan, if you don't love me, then don't come to bother me. I will find a lawyer. No matter what, I will get a divorce. After speaking, I turned to leave, but Claire beside me grabbed my arm. Vivian, is there some misunderstanding between you and Ethan? Does it have to come to the point of divorce over something so serious? Claire held my hand, her anxious expression seeming to truly not want me and Ethan to divorce. But the look of joy and anticipation in my eyes betrayed her. There's no misunderstanding, I said, forcefully shaking off Claire's hand. But unexpectedly, Claire took advantage of the moment and knocked over the hot pot on the table. The scalding oil spilled all over her hand, causing her to scream uncontrollably. Vivian, you've gone too far. Seeing Claire raise her reddened hands, Ethan hurriedly pulled her into his arms. If you want a divorce, fine, but you don't have to be so cruel as to ruin Claire's hands. I'm telling you, if Claire's hands can never paint again, I will never let you off. Saying that, Ethan gave me a fierce look and carried Claire straight to the hospital. The surroundings were chaotic, but my world was very quiet. Watching their retreating figures, I finally couldn't hold back the tears at the corner of my eyes. When I stepped out of the seafood restaurant, a light rain was falling outside. Gazing at the scattered raindrops, I took a deep breath. I returned home, took out my suitcase, and stuffed all my belongings into it in one go. When I left, I glanced once more at the place where Ethan and I had lived for 5 years. This time, I truly wouldn't look back. Pushing my luggage into the rental apartment my mom had found for me early in the morning, I looked at the 2-bedroom, One living room place that was fairly spacious, and suddenly I felt very tired. I pushed the luggage aside and collapsed onto the sofa, recalling all the moments Ethan and I had shared. Watching the sunlight gradually shift from white to yellow, I finally fell asleep without realizing it. When I woke up, it was already early the next morning. I quickly tidied myself and my luggage, then stepped out the door. "Hello, I would like to find Victor." "Sure, please follow me." At the entrance of the law firm, the receptionist led me into Victor's office. This was the lawyer my mom had introduced to me, telling me I must see him because he had won many divorce cases. But as I stepped into the office, when the man behind the desk looked up with a smile, I was surprised to find that he was actually my childhood playmate. "Long time no see, Vivian." "Victor," I exclaimed, but the man across from me seemed to have anticipated my surprise. He just smiled wider and then waved for his assistant to leave. "When did you return to the country? Why did you even change your name?" "Last year. My parents divorced and I went with my mom." After a few pleasantries, Victor placed a document in front of me. "I heard from Auntie, and I have also prepared the divorce agreement. Take a look." Seeing the agreement clearly and plainly written, I nodded. Just as I was about to get up and leave, Victor called out to me. "Vivian, long time no see. Let me treat you to a meal." Victor and I arrived at the restaurant, and he gallantly pulled out a chair for me. But just as we were about to eat, we ran into Ethan and Claire coming towards us. "Vivian, who is he?" Ethan stood in front of me expressionless, his tone carrying a cold hint of anger. "None of your business." I gripped the glass of water tightly in front of me, forcing myself not to look at him. "What do you mean, none of my business? You're married, yet you're having a meal with another man behind my back?" Ethan's voice grew louder as he grabbed me, forcing me to look at him. Seeing the anger in his eyes, mixed with a trace of jealousy, I suddenly found it amusing. "Ethan, what about you?" I said, glancing at Claire beside him. Claire beside me just bit her lower lip tightly, saying nothing. Hearing my words, Ethan was momentarily stunned, and the strength with which he held me lessened slightly. I took the opportunity to pull my hand away. "Victor, there's something dirty here. Let's go somewhere else." Saying that, I picked up my bag to leave, but once again Ethan grabbed me possessively. "Vivian, you're not allowed to leave." "Ethan, right? Hello, I am Vivian's lawyer." At the same time, Victor also stood up. He snatched my hand from Ethan's grip and then shielded me behind him. Looking at Victor's back, I was momentarily dazed. Ethan used to protect me like this, but now the one he's protecting is Claire. "A lawyer?" "Yes, a divorce lawyer." Hearing Victor's words, the veins on Ethan's forehead bulged instantly. "Vivian, do you really want to divorce me?" "Yes." "I won't agree to it, and besides, you can't raise a child on your own." Listening to Ethan's confident tone, I suddenly laughed. Even now, he still thought we had a child together. "Ethan, look." Saying this, I took off my coat, revealing my flat belly, which instantly flustered Ethan. "Vivian, to get a divorce, you were cruel enough to abort the child?" "Ethan, do you think it's possible that you were the one who aborted the child?" "Impossible, absolutely impossible." Suddenly, Ethan seemed to realize something, and his face turned pale in an instant. "No, it can't be. That day you clearly used chicken blood. Impossible." "Chicken blood?" "Ethan, can you use some brain?" I was 6 months pregnant and fell down the stairs. When would I have had time to get chicken blood? Looking at Ethan's incredulous and pained expression, I suddenly felt a thrill of revenge. "But you once." "I once used chicken blood to deceive you, but if you really cared about me, how could you ignore my pleas to you? Do you know, if you had taken me to the hospital earlier, maybe the child could have been saved. But what about you?" As I spoke, I glanced again at Claire beside him. "Ethan, do you know how much pain I felt when the child was gone?" "Ethan, our child, you are the culprit." After saying this, I turned to leave, but Ethan grabbed me once again. "Vivian, I don't know." "So, Ethan, let's get a divorce." No, Vivian. "We can have another child, but Vivian, I will never agree to a divorce." Listening to Ethan's fickleness, I felt an inexplicable irritation. He was the one who abandoned me, the one who said I couldn't compare to his first love, the one who agreed to the divorce, and now he's the one opposing it. But before I could speak, Victor, who was standing in front of me, spoke first. "It's okay, if the agreement doesn't work out, I will apply for enforcement." After saying that, without waiting for Ethan to react, Victor took my hand and left the restaurant. "Victor, thank you." After leaving the restaurant, I pulled my hand back and looked at Victor gratefully. But I don't know why, I saw a moment of disappointment in Victor's eyes. "It's nothing. I'll take you home." Victor looked at me deeply, then sighed, reaching out to rub my head, just like when we were kids. We were silent all the way until Victor saw me home. "Vivian." Just as I was about to use the key to open the door, Victor's voice came from beside me. The moment I looked up, a warm, wet kiss fell on my lips without any warning. His kiss was gentle yet domineering, lingering and exploring between my lips and teeth. I looked at Victor, who was so close, in surprise, but he had his eyes closed, immersed in the kiss. "Victor, what are you doing?" After I came to my senses, I pushed Victor away forcefully. Victor looked at me with a hurt expression, then lowered his head and murmured to himself, "Vivian, after your divorce, do I have a chance?" Hearing his words, I didn't know how to respond for a moment. Actually, I had always known about Victor's feelings for me, but after he went abroad 15 years ago, we never contacted each other again. I always thought he had long let go. I just didn't expect. "Victor, You don't have to answer me so quickly. I'll wait for you." After saying this, without waiting for my response, Victor turned and left hurriedly. Watching Victor's somewhat dejected back, I don't know why, but I always had an indescribable feeling in my heart. After that, I never saw Ethan again for a long time. Victor would buy me breakfast every morning before going to work, and after work, he would take me out for dinner. He said it was on the way, but I knew very well it was not on the way at all. Recently, Ethan's Facebook has become increasingly strange. He keeps updating his status, each post showing him traveling with Claire, accompanied by many sweet and loving captions. I thought he must be very happy with Claire, just waiting for our divorce papers. But it wasn't until Claire appeared that I realized I was wrong. Claire stood in front of me, wanting to talk. I actually had nothing to say to her, but her words made me stop in my tracks. "Vivian, can you please give Ethan back to me?" Hearing her words, I turned to look at her curiously. Ethan and I were already divorced, so what did she mean by that? Sitting in the cafe, I looked at Claire, her eyes brimming with tears, with curiosity. She seemed to have lost her bright and glamorous colors, looking completely different from the Claire I once met. "Vivian, I beg you, please give Ethan back to me, okay?" Looking into Claire's pleading eyes and hearing her choked voice, I finally understood why she came to see me. "After leaving you, Ethan took me to many places. I always thought he had let you go, but every time he wakes from a midnight dream, the name he calls out is always yours. I really love Ethan, so please, can you give him back to me?" As I spoke, before I could react, Claire suddenly knelt down in front of me with a thud. I was so startled that I quickly stood up, and at the same time, Ethan's voice sounded not far away. "What are you two doing?" Ethan hurriedly walked over and pulled Claire up. "Ethan, I told you not to come looking for Vivian. Do you not understand?" Before Claire could finish speaking, Ethan unusually shouted at her angrily. "But Ethan, I really love you. Shut up." Saying this, Ethan then turned to me. "Vivian, sorry, I didn't watch her properly. I'll take her back right now." After saying this, Ethan dragged Claire out of the coffee shop. The farce ended, and I inexplicably walked out of the coffee shop. I don't know what exactly happened between Ethan and Claire that caused such a huge change in both of them, but whatever it was, it had nothing to do with me. A few days later, I walked out of Victor's law firm and once again ran into Ethan. The bruises on his face made him look even more haggard than a few days ago, and he had even forgotten to shave his beard. "Vivian, can we talk?" Ethan took me to the artificial lake in the park, the place of our first date, and also where he proposed to me. Watching the ripples on the lake, Ethan still remained silent. "Ethan, if you don't speak, I'm leaving." Saying this, I picked up my bag, ready to leave. At that moment, Ethan finally spoke. "Vivian, will you give me one more chance?" Ethan held my hand, looking at me pleadingly. Seeing the hopeful look in Ethan's eyes, I finally sighed and then sat down. "Ethan, do you think we still have a chance?" "Yes, as long as you are willing to forgive me, I will definitely treat you well from now on." "What about Claire?" Hearing me mention Claire, a trace of disgust flashed in Ethan's eyes. "Actually, she never loved me, she only loved money. Back then, she married abroad for money, but later her husband gambled and lost all the money, so she came back. But she came back just to pay off her husband's gambling debts." As he spoke, Ethan clenched his fists tightly. "So, am I just a backup?" Hearing my words, Ethan hurriedly shook his head. No. Vivian, you were never a backup. Actually, when you said you wanted a divorce, I really didn't want it, but I didn't expect Claire to deliberately burn herself. I admit I used to love Claire, but later, when I saw you dining with other men, I really got jealous. After you left, I took Claire to many places. I desperately tried to forget you, but the more I tried, the more I missed you. I remembered you said you loved looking at the stars the most, so I went to the Salt Lake. I remembered you said you had never seen the sea, so I went to Sonia. I remembered you said the aurora was incredibly beautiful, so I went to Antarctica. But no matter where I went, you were never by my side. It wasn't until that moment that I realized the one I've always loved was you." Saying this, Ethan took my hand again, his eyes slightly red. "Vivian, I was wrong. Will you forgive me just this once?" "Just once, I swear." "Vivian, can we start over?" Looking at Ethan's pleading eyes, all I felt was sorrow. I loved him so much back then, giving up my career just for him, returning to family life, supporting my husband and raising children. But what about him? He betrayed my love, and now he comes with regret too late. I pulled my hand away from his, then took out the red notebook from my bag and threw it in front of him. "Ethan, we are already divorced. There is no us anymore." Saying this, I stood up to leave, but Ethan grabbed me once again. "Vivian, can we start over? I beg you, don't leave me. I can't live without you." As he spoke, Ethan tried to forcibly pull me into his arms. Just then, Victor suddenly appeared and punched Ethan in the face, freeing me from Ethan's embrace. "Ethan, the harm you've done to Vivian can never be undone. I warned you not to show up in front of her. Now, don't blame me if I show no mercy." With that, Victor threw another punch at Ethan. But Ethan fell to the ground, motionless, letting Victor punch him again and again. Seeing the usually gentle Victor so furious startled me. I hurriedly stepped forward to hold him back. If this continued, I was afraid someone might really get hurt. I glanced back once more at Ethan lying on the ground, looking as if his soul had left his body. I pulled Victor away without looking back. Victor, dragged into the car by me, wore a sullen face, neither looking at me nor speaking, as if he was angry. Looking at Victor's expressionless face, I didn't dare to provoke him and could only boredly take out my phone to scroll through it. But before I could read a few words of the message, Victor violently snatched it away. "I'm angry, very angry." "I know. If you know, why don't you come and comfort me?" Looking at Victor acting like a child, I couldn't help but let out a snicker. "Why are you still like when you were little? You're already so grown up." Saying that, I raised my hand to grab my phone back, but Victor's big hand caught it firmly. "No matter how old I am, I still need you to comfort me." Saying this, he suddenly leaned close to me and pinned me against the backrest. "Vivian, promise me you won't see him anymore, okay?" Victor looked at me deeply, his breath warm against my face. But before I could speak, Victor's kiss came again. His kiss was still domineering yet gentle, but this time, I didn't push him away. I don't know how long it lasted, until I felt like I could hardly breathe. Victor reluctantly let me go. All right, I agree. I wrapped my hands around Victor's neck, smiling at him. At this moment, it was as if I saw a light in Victor's eyes. He looked at me, the fire in his eyes burning brighter and brighter, and in an instant, his kiss came again like a tide. He was desperately demanding, exploring, and just as he was about to break through the secret, I stopped him in time. Victor, I can't right now. Sorry, I forgot, you just had surgery. Victor looked at me incoherently, but the desire in his eyes had not faded at all. Stepping back from me, Victor took a deep breath, then drove me home. I thought Ethan and I had made things very clear, but to my surprise, a few days later, Ethan still came looking for me. Early in the morning, just as I got up, there was a knock at the door. I thought it was Victor, and happily went to open the door, but to my surprise, it was Ethan. Ethan appeared at my doorstep holding a bouquet of roses in one hand and a cake in the other, with a bruise still visible on the corner of his mouth from the day he was hit. Vivian, happy birthday. Staring at Ethan, who suddenly appeared, I was stunned. Ethan, how did you know I live here? Vivian, I went to buy fish early this morning. Look, it's so fresh. I know you love fish the most. Saying this, Ethan ignored my protests and walked straight into the house. Ethan, I made it very clear that day, we can never be together again. Vivian. Ethan turned around and grabbed my hand as I tried to push him away, his eyes full of hurt and tenderness as he looked at me. That day, you and Victor were in the car, I saw it all. But in the end, you still rejected him, didn't you? That shows you still have feelings for me. Vivian, I really know I was wrong. Seeing you with Victor made me realize how much I mistreated you before. Vivian, can you give me one more chance? Saying that, Ethan suddenly knelt down on one knee, holding a delicate diamond ring in his hand. Looking at the sincere Ethan kneeling on the ground, I reached out and took the ring from him. With his smile growing wider, I turned around and threw the ring out the window. Ethan, no matter how many times, we can never be together. Ethan, take your cheap flowers and love, and get out of my home. Saying that, I pushed the flowers and fish dishes on the table, along with Ethan himself, out the door. I don't know when Ethan left, but after that, I never saw him again. When Victor arrived, Ethan was no longer outside the door. Seeing no one behind Victor, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Victor took me to eat snacks, play at the amusement park, hop along the paths, and even set off fireworks all over the city for me at night, as if we had returned to our childhood. I thought maybe we could just keep going like this, but accidents always come sooner than tomorrow. On the way home, I suddenly craved an ice cream I used to eat as a child, so Victor told me to wait by the roadside while he went to buy it. But while I was waiting for him, someone suddenly covered my mouth and nose from behind and dragged me into an alley. I struggled desperately, but the person behind me was too strong. I simply couldn't fight him off. In the end, I saw Claire smoking in the corner of the alley. Seeing me being dragged in, Claire exhaled her last puff of smoke, threw away the cigarette butt and approached me with a grimace. I clearly saw that she was holding a shining knife in her hand. Vivian, why did you have to break me and Ethan apart? I clearly begged you to give Ethan back to me, but why does he still come to find you? I loved him so much, but why does he always come to you? Looking at the utterly insane Claire, I shrank back in fear, but the person behind me left me nowhere to retreat. Tell me, if I destroy you, will Ethan come back to me? Claire said as she picked up a knife and made several slashing motions across my face. Claire, if you have something to say it properly. I've told Ethan, there's no future for us. You have to let me go. Let go? Vivian, are you too naive? If I let you go, will Ethan still come to you? I still won't have him. If only you didn't exist in this world, how great that would be. Saying this, Claire recklessly lunged at me with the knife. Watching the crazed Claire, I closed my eyes in fear. But the imagined pain never came. Instead, a warm liquid splashed onto my face. A metallic smell hit me, and I hurriedly opened my eyes. What met my gaze was Victor slowly collapsing. Victor. Perhaps startled, the hands that were grappling me suddenly loosened. I seized the chance to lunge forward and hold on to Victor. Vivian, you're okay? Really, really good. Victor's outstretched hand froze midair, then fell limply. I held Victor, frantically calling his name, but no one answered anymore. Until the distant sound of police sirens and ambulances arose, I could no longer hear any other sound. Claire and the person she brought were arrested, and Victor and I were taken to the hospital. Watching Victor lie on the hospital bed, pale and lifeless, my heartbeat in sync with the monitors beeping. Victor, Victor. At that moment, a finely dressed woman rushed into the ward in a panic. Aunt Grace. Seeing me, Aunt Grace was momentarily stunned, then silently nodded at me. Looking at Victor lying motionless on the bed, Aunt Grace's eyes reddened. Victor, is he okay? The doctor said no vital organs were damaged, just excessive blood loss. He's still very weak now. Vivian, can we talk? Aunt Grace took me to the hospital garden, looked at me for a long time, then sighed deeply and took a notebook out of her bag. This is Victor's. Actually, Victor liked you very much when he was a child. You know that, right? Sigh, it's actually my fault too. Back then, I neglected the two of them because of work. After I divorced his father, he went abroad with his dad. A year ago, his dad passed away from cancer, and only then did he return to the country. He followed me and later changed his own name. Actually, he never had a girlfriend. I always thought it was because he hadn't found the right one until I saw his notebook. After he returned to the country, he chose to stay here for you, but by then you were already married. Yet he still chose to stay, just so he could quietly watch over you. Your mother and I have advised him countless times, but he just has this stubborn temper, and there's nothing we can do about it. Actually, I'm not saying all this to make things difficult for you. Having watched you grow up, I know what kind of person you are. It's just that I don't want to see my son suffer anymore. Vivian, since you've already chosen to give up on that marriage, don't keep lingering ties. If you also like Victor, then please be a little kinder to him. Listening to Aunt Grace's words, I silently opened Victor's diary, reading every word filled with his secret love for me. Seeing Aunt Grace's eyes reddened, I tearfully took her trembling hand. Mom, I won't let Victor get hurt even a little anymore, I promise. After saying this, I rushed desperately toward the hospital room. When I opened the door, Victor just woke up. I threw myself into his arms with all my strength. Victor, will you marry me? Yes, the summer cicadas sang, and the sunlight was just right.